we've had the Pentagon leaks, NATO leaks, whatever we want to call them. There's been an arrest made. A lot of the information wasn't so glaringly, I don't know, secretive. It seemed like a lot of things that we might have known, maybe distorted information on things we might have already known. But I want to ask you this, because we have a situation where Russia, you said, is the capital of the multipolar world. Over the last year, we've been told that Russia was supposed to be weakened. Sanctions on Russia over the Ukraine situation was supposed to bring Russia down, and that Russia's this authoritarian state that's invading Ukraine. Yet it seems like much of the world has only warmed more to Russia. You have the African continent. You have now, I know Sergei Lavrov is traveling across Latin America. He's going to be visiting Cuba and many other countries. What is going on here? It seems like Russia is not only strong, but also, as you said, the capital of the multipolar world. Can you explain what's going on here?
Oh yeah, in many different levels. The first level is what struck me when I spent my first months in Russia, last month in March. I arrived in late February. So I spent March here. Then I went to Istanbul for 1 week, another week in Paris, and now I'm back here for another month. My initial impression the day I arrived in late February was this country is not at war. That was the first feeling that you had in Moscow. The city is even more beautiful than before. So I had not been here since start of my last time was before COVID. So it was in the winter before COVID. So this was my first trip in 3 years or so. And the first impression that you have, beautiful city, wonderful parks, clean everywhere. If it snows 1 hour later, everything is absolutely clean. Every street that you go, the supermarkets are, the shelves are the supermarkets. In fact, some of them are even better provided than supermarkets in Paris or in Munich or in Rome. Everybody very well dressed. The restaurants are full. The quality of the restaurants is still. This is one of the gastronomic capitals of the world, which was not the case years ago. And of course, you feel a patriotic feeling, which, let's put it this way, the Great Patriotic War 2.0. And also, when you talk to people longer anymore detail, they said, yeah, this changed a lot, especially these past few months. It was not like that in February last year, for instance. A lot of people were actually freaking out. A lot of people left the country. There was a sort of mini run on some banks. And a lot of expats, especially Americans, Canadians, and Europeans, left for good. And some even quit their jobs and went back to the West. And this changed completely now, because now, even though, and this, for instance, this observation came from a high-level executive in one of the top companies in Russia. His own definition, I'm quoting him, this is an almost war. And I found that brilliant, because from the point of view of the Kremlin has, as much as they had explained in relative detail the biggest of the biggest games behind the SMO, the Special Military Operation, they didn't. The feeling around is that, look, we're not totally at war. This is a special military operation, or as our friend Andrei Martyanov describes it very well, it's a combined arms operation, right? But now people are starting to get the picture, finally, especially considering all the terror attacks, from the assassination of Daria Dugina to the attempt against Crimea, against the Crimea bridge, the Kerch bridge, and the killing of Vladlen recently. Now people know that Russia can be attacked by, not only directly by the SBU, Ukrainian intelligence, but with help from NATO, and especially MI6 and MI6 working with NATO. So most people now understand it perfectly. This is a NATO war against Russia. You cannot disguise it anymore. And they also understand that Russia by itself is facing down the whole collective West. Which nation on earth is capable of doing that? Not even China would be able to do it, right? Even with their economic power, but they don't have the military power. Russia has. And Russia hasn't even used the top of the line military power that they have, which is still in reserve and just waiting to see if NATO starts having funny ideas later on, right? So the atmosphere, especially in Moscow, I haven't traveled around. I hope to do this this coming summer or in the fall. But in Moscow, which I'm getting deeper and deeper into different layers in Moscow, not only diplomatic, but business-wise, religiously. I'm plunging into Eastern Orthodoxy. This weekend, my weekend on Saturday and Sunday was basically spent in ceremonies, in church ceremonies, discussing about it and going to services. It's part of, let's say, my late life religious education on Eastern Orthodoxy, which is linked to one of my historical passions, which is Byzantium. So in terms of a cultural effervescence around, it's something absolutely extraordinary. I'll give you a simple example to you guys. Yesterday, Sunday, I was invited for a church service by Father Mikhail, which is high-ranking priest in charge of some relations between the Orthodox Church and the Kremlin. He's very high up, very well connected, a wonderful man, very simple, extremely knowledgeable. And he invited some of us to go to his parish where he was celebrating the service. And he wanted people to read the Gospel of St. John in different languages. So can you imagine? So we had, for instance, a friend of mine who teaches ancient Greek at Moscow University reading the Gospel of St. John in ancient Greek. There was a Latinist reading in Latin. There were students from Moscow University reading in Italian or in French or in German. And there was a student from Inner Mongolia who read it in Mandarin, and they invited me to read it in Spanish. So, and then there was a communal banquet in where the priests live in the parish. Everybody sitting on the same communal table discussing and all that, an atmosphere of a cultural interchange, absolutely extraordinary. And you see people, their level of education and their level of awareness of what's going on around the world is something absolutely extraordinary. Not to mention that here we are free to discuss cultural wars, cancel culture, civilization wars, etc., in a way that I cannot do it, for instance, in Paris, which is my main home. If I try to do this in Paris, they shut me up. Or, as I think I told many people already, my own friends had deserted me because they said that I went to the other side. This means I'm trying to engage in a conversation that is substantive about culture, about politics, about geopolitics, about geoeconomics. But you cannot do this in Europe anymore because cancel culture and wokeism rules. So when you used to be a 3.5 hour flight directly from Paris to Moscow. Nowadays, many of you know you have to go around to arrive here. In my case, for instance, I have to go through Istanbul, which is the easiest ways to get here. A friend of mine, a British academic, you know what he did with his wife? He flew to Warsaw. From Warsaw, they took a bus to Kaliningrad. They crossed the border, the Polish Kaliningrad border on foot. And then in Kaliningrad, they took a plane to arrive in Moscow. So this is what the West has given us, all of us interested in Russian civilization, culture, and politics, who want to come here. Is very, very difficult if you are in the West. You know, so we're going to make things even more difficult for all of you. So, from my point of view as a political analyst, the fact that I can have this direct comparison of life in NATO-stan, France, and life in Russia nowadays, it's absolutely priceless. And when I tell people, ask me here all the time, oh, what's going on in Europe? When you tell them what is real life now in Europe, and on top of it, the first time the Europeans are actually seeing actual inflation. Like you go to your corner store, you want to buy some potatoes, some tomatoes, or greens, and when you look at it, oops, this was 10% more expensive than it was last month. This never happened in Europe since the end of the Second World War. You know, so now they're living what all of us who lived in the global South We know how it works, right? So now they are living it inside Europe. And not to mention, in the case of France, everything that is being caused by the idiosyncrasies and the stupidity of les petits rois, the little king Emmanuel Macron. So, wow. And then you come here and you see a working civilization and culture, a working city, a city that everything is absolutely impeccable, even dealing with the bureaucracy. Today, I was dealing with the local bureaucracy, opening a bank account. I did everything electronically, and in 10 minutes, I had my bank account. Try to do this in the West. It's absolutely impossible. So just a few examples for you to set the tone to our conversation.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, especially about life in Russia. I mean, when you were speaking, I was thinking back, after the fall of the Soviet Union, Russia was supposed to be perpetually and permanently defeated. But
Yes.
even with this incredibly dangerous conflict that NATO is waging in Ukraine to try to get to Russia militarily, it seems like the opposite is going on. I mean, how has Russia done this, especially on the economic front? Because I think not a lot of people understand the economics of this. How has Russia been able to soften the blow, if not completely defeat this attempt to destabilize further what was, I mean, Pepe, the shock therapy was just,
Oof.
it
Tell
was
me about.
hell. And how did
I
Russia get out of
remember,
this?
Danny. I was here. I came here in the 90s as a correspondent many times, including the ruble crisis in 1998. I came from Japan. I arrived here in the middle of the ruble crisis. I remember very, very well. And the election of Putin in 2000, I was here covering the election. I spent almost a month here in early 2000 covering the first presidential election, which elected Putin the first time. And Russia was completely shattered, was devastated by the Yeltsin years, by our friend Jeffrey Sachs, who had a road to Damascus movement moment, and now is preaching, okay, let's try to understand Russia and Russia's civilization. At the time, Jeffrey Sachs boys, the Milton Friedman guys, boys from Chicago and everything, they had devastated Russia, and they had handed over Russia to a bunch of oligarchs. Some of them later were chased by the Kremlin. Some of them were expelled. Some of them were dealt with in different manners, different layers. But at least, and it took Putin and the Kremlin years to more or less sanitize the situation. And of course, bring at least some of the funds back, but not all of them, because a lot of these funds were in fiscal paradises. Some of them were placed in secret accounts in Switzerland or in Austria. So they're still trying to recover many of those funds from the 90s. What they did, at least, was stopping the sale of Russian natural resources, or stopping speculators from the West to take over different sectors of Russian natural resources. So now it's a completely different thing. They were prepared. We can say broadly that the Kremlin and the Russian Central Bank and the Ministry of Finance, they had studied the different scenarios in terms of how they're going to turn up the sanction meter like they did. Of course, the way it was done by the US and the EU together was something that we have never seen in modern history, in fact. But they were more or less prepared. Okay, there were some mistakes from the beginning. And this is something that when I discussed in person last month with Sergei Glaziev and his number one economic advisor, Dmitry Mityayev, we had was only the three of us at their office at the Eurasia Economic Union. They were very generous with their time. In fact, they even asked me questions, which I felt, wow, guys, I'm here to ask you questions. But they wanted to know about some stuff in the West, some stuff about the Global South. And so. But basically what they told me, and don't forget that the people at the Eurasia Economic Union, they have a serious clash with Elvira Nabiulina and the Russian Central Bank, which they consider basically a central bank like any other, responding to the Bank of International Settlements and responding to the American control of the international financial system. Glaziev and Mityayev, they are sovereignists, Eurasianists, and independent-minded economic gurus, let's put it this way. What they are working already, for instance, this week, while we're talking, they're both in Beijing. This is very, very important because they are basic. Of course, they didn't have to say that, but they went to Beijing to deepen the conversation that they were having in terms of designing an alternative currency based in gold, in commodities, or both. And this is being organized and designed inside the Eurasia Economic Union, the Eurasia Economic Commission, to be more precise, which is their legislative arm, response to the Eurasia Economic Union. And Sergei Glaziev is the Ministry of Macroeconomy. So he's the guy responsible for all this, these new operations. And they are discussing with the Chinese from the beginning, since last year. So now the discussions are getting deeper, because now they should start thinking, how are we going to coordinate what we are thinking here with the BRICS drive to come up with an alternative currency? And this is something that Lula said while he was in Beijing a few days ago. This is something that we know that is being discussed, but still in very approximative terms between the 5 BRICS. But soon, with the BRICS summit coming in South Africa in August, we're going to have BRICS Plus in action already. So we're going to have BRICS Plus already expanded. And among those, it's a very, very, very important new member, Saudi Arabia. And then we get the connection between OPEC Plus, which is basically being run by Mohammed bin Salman and Putin together. OPEC Plus basically is, let's say, the direction comes from Russia and Saudi Arabia, and everybody follows, right? And with Saudi Arabia inside BRICS, Saudi Arabia is going to have, I would say, a geoeconomic importance inside BRICS superior to some BRICS members. And I would single out immediately Brazil and South Africa, and maybe as important as India. In fact, even more important than India, because India is an importer of energy. Saudi Arabia is one of the largest suppliers on the planet, including to some of the BRICS, right? So this changes the whole configuration. And when Glaziev and Mityayev come back from Beijing, which should be the end of this week, we were planning, some of us, 5 or 6 of us, to sit down together, and they can more or less, off the record, but what they are allowed to say, what will be the next steps in this drive towards designing an alternative currency. What we know so far, Danny and all of you, and this is, we have to be very straightforward about it, it's going to be an extremely complicated process. And this is something that I heard last week, talking to one of the guys of the financial system here. He said, look, we are working on a separate model, a different system. It's not what the Americans are thinking in terms of Bretton Woods 3 or Neocon or whatever. It's a completely different thing. If we manage to sell our idea to large businesses, not only in Russia, but across the Eurasia Economic Union, then we have a big start, because we can have businesses saying, okay, we're going to start using this new payment system, which bypasses the dollar and will be supported by this new currency based on commodities, essentially. But for all of you, you should know that this is something that it could take years, in fact. Or if we have an intervention from some pantheon of Hindu gods, maybe next year we're going to have the beginning of the whole thing. But okay, it's going to be much more complicated than that. But it's an ongoing process, and it's uniting multilateral organizations, existing multilateral organizations, the Eurasia Economic Union, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and BRICS. And that's what makes it so important. And that's one of the main reasons why the Americans are freaking out big time.